Hello and welcome. Today I'm sharing the books I read during the month of May, along with all of my thoughts on them. This month I read a wonderful mix of cozy classics and nostalgic mysteries and vintage suspense, couple magical realism books, fairy tale-inspired stories, and general women's fiction. So there was plenty of variety on my reading stack. Rather than a traditional sit-down wrap-up, I'm bringing you along in a vlog-style reading experience so you can feel as though you've joined me throughout the month. You'll see what I picked up, what I loved, what surprised me, and how each book kind of fit into my reading life as May unfolded. So settle in with something to drink, get comfortable, and let's revisit my May reading journey together. With that said, let's jump back to May 1st, where I picked up Rose Cottage by Mary Stewart to start the month out on May Day with this lovely, cozy read. So in this we have Kathy. She is a widow, a young war widow. She married someone kind of short notice, and it ended up that he passed away. He didn't make it through the war. And she discovered after that he actually came from a family of means. So Kathy is in the situation where she has an inheritance. She's gotten money from her husband's side of the family. She doesn't have to work, but she chooses to. She gets a phone call one day where her grandmother says, "I'm ill. I need you to go back to your childhood home, which is Rose Cottage, and find a safe that I have hidden behind a print and wallpaper. It's all hidden back there because I've got some papers and other important things that are stored there that I need you to get." I know, by the way, they're talking about having this like real estate development situation come in, and maybe Rose Cottage will be torn down or rented out. And so Kathy returns to her childhood home and village. It turns out that she and her family worked for the wealthier family up at Todd Hall. One of the things that I love so immensely in this is that in the middle of this book, they joked about it being Toad Hall, like in Wind in the Willows. And I was so glad because every time I read Todd Hall, I was like, oh, it's Toad Hall, just kind of thinking about that. That was kind of what I pictured. So I was glad that Mary Stewart acknowledged that. Once Kathy gets there, though, she goes to Rose Cottage, which I loved the description of the cottage. So finally, on page 40, we get to the Rose Cottage. It was tiny, a genuine cottage, 2.5 up and 2 down, with a back place built out behind, over which a diminutive bathroom had been added. The 2.5 up had dormer windows projecting from the thatch, and the little window of what had been my bedroom had not allowed the morning sun very much of a peep. The garden showed every evidence of the past year's neglect, in a joyous riot of overgrown rose bushes and weeds and summer flowers, but someone had cleared the front path, and the windows and curtains looked fresh and clean. So glad to finally be there. This book does not move fast. It is not, super suspenseful like some of Mary Stewart's other novels, but I do think it has that cozy feeling that I loved in Thornyhold. This is so much of your village life. We go along with Kathy as she, stops by and talks to the vicar. She's stopping by the older ladies. She's going to the stores. She's visiting Todd Hall. She's very much a part of the village life, and we learn about her past through her traveling in the village. So if you kind of love a quiet novel that does have a bit of a mystery where you're kind of trying to figure out what's going on, then Rose Cottage would be a perfect choice for you. I actually really loved Rose Cottage. I feel like I need to reread Thornyhold to be able to kind of compare them. I feel like they are so very similar, but Rose Cottage is definitely up there with Mary Stewart books that I love, and I think this was a perfect choice for beginning on May Day, on May 1st. So next, what I am doing is I've got my little backpack here, and in my backpack, I have grabbed The Elusive Mrs. Pollifax, which is the third book in Dorothy Gilman's series. I got this recently on Indie Bookstore Day when I did a crawl through the indie bookstores in our area. They had these like newer editions, and while I have two old hardcovers that I love, the older editions are harder to find, and I love these newer, bigger prints versus the mass market paperbacks. So I am going to take this out and about with me today. I'm hoping to find a place to sit down and read Mrs. Pollifax and continue through reading through my books that have flowers on the cover for the Mayflowers Readathon. As I continue reading through The Elusive Mrs. Pollifax, I'm not quite ready to talk to you guys about that one, but I did want to share two audiobooks that I have listened to so far this month. I listened to both of them pretty fast because I think they're pretty fast moving. The first one is Lady Tremaine by Rachel Hockhauser.
I've been warned to be wary of strangers in the woods since I was a little girl. A person, alone, unfamiliar, hidden in the dappled darkness is not to be trusted, and certainly the woods can hide the sorts of people you'd rather not encounter. But just as shadows serve to hide and disguise, they also provide privacy and solitude, and, if you look carefully, beauty.
This was a book that I was very close to absolutely loving so much. But there was a twist at the end with a trope that just felt icky. So let me just share a little bit about it. So first of all, this follows Lady Tremaine. She is the evil stepmother in the Cinderella story. So after Cinderella's mother passed away, her father remarries. She brings two sisters from a previous marriage into this blended family, and then Cinderella's father dies, and Lady Tremaine is left with her two daughters and Cinderella. Well, this gives us the story of Lady Tremaine, and it really makes you love Lady Tremaine and be annoyed with Cinderella. So we get Lady Tremaine's story of where she is now, where she has now buried two husbands. She is a falconer, Lady Tremaine is. And so we get a lot of, like, the book starts out with her going out hunting with the falcon to catch some rabbits to make sure that they have something to eat. Because again, with her having buried two husbands, she is really kind of at the bottom of her, bank account. She does not have a lot of money for food and taking care of the crumbling manor and keeping the staff and keeping the girls dressed in nice outfits. So she's out hunting, which a lady in her level should not be doing. So that's kind of how the book starts out. And there is a lot of parallel between a falconer and a falcon and their relationship and the story that she tells of her life. So I loved that part. All of that to say, there are two what I would consider content warnings for this book. There is animal trauma that I think was hard. And so, again, you can message me and I can try to share that information with you. And then the other thing is there is a twist that I don't want to spoil, but when the twist happened, I found myself really thinking, was this a decision that the author absolutely had to make, or could there have been a different way of needing the same outcome, but not having, the reasons for needing that outcome to be the same? Because it's a twist that I'm just not really fond of on so many levels. So for me, that really kind of knocked a book that I would have said I loved so much. I mean, I flew through it and I started to see the writing on the wall and I was like, oh no, is this where we're going? And that's where we went. So that was Lady Tremaine. And then the second audiobook that I have listened to so far this month is The River Muse by Laura Risaw.
In morning sunshine, as her daughter slept, Callie cranked open the window of their attic nook, breathing in buttery scents of croissants from a nearby boulangerie. We are free. It felt like looking over a cliff, that mix of vertigo and awe, fear and joy. Some muscles clenching, others relaxing, as her heart tried to make sense of it all.
So I was excited to get an advanced audio format for The River Muse. And I enjoyed it. I loved the setting of being in France and the truffle forest kind of feud that we were into, and also the resilience that Callie, the main character, and her daughter Eva experienced through having to flee from Callie's abusive partner. Callie is a widow and a single mother, and she ended up in an abusive relationship after her husband died. One of the writing structures that the author did was to write a letter to herself in the past so that we could kind of get a feel for the gaslighting, the manipulation, the physical abuse, the mental abuse that she was experiencing. So rather than taking us back and experiencing that, Laura Ruiz saw very creatively just brought us back into the past as our main character was writing a letter to herself as like a diary or a journal. And so we got all of that information through those letters to kind of, we start in the present at the beginning, we go back with all those letters, and by the end, we've caught up to where the letters ended and she escaped. I think the thing that was hard for me is this book was heavier than I expected. It very much is a full story of an abusive relationship, what it's like to be in an abusive relationship and to escape from that abusive relationship. And so there was a lot of suspense in there because she's always looking over her shoulder. I think because of the letter writing happening throughout the entire book, we never really felt fully free, which again, if you're in a relationship with an abuser, maybe that's really how you feel, is never fully free. You're always concerned and you're always kind of thinking about it. There is resolution at the end that I think was satisfying. There also is this very like tender, wholesome romance in when she finally gets to this small village in France. And so we have that as well. I loved the mother-daughter relationship and kind of how that was portrayed. I just think, like I said, this was very heavy with kind of the abusive relationship part. And I think that was the part that made it more of a difficult read than what I'm used to. I realize magical realism very much has this whimsy part, but it's always balanced out with pretty heavy content. And so I think that's something where I would say it is a great audiobook to listen to. I think it's really great for the summer because it is kind of set in the heat of the summer in France. I mean, it's just perfectly set for the summer, but you just have that caution of there is a lot in there about this abusive relationship. So that would just be something to be cognizant of. In The Elusive Mrs. Pollifax, we have this elderly CIA spy. She works for the CIA only on special missions because she's this unassuming, unobtrusive elderly lady, basically. She's a widow. And the CIA uses her for just specific missions. She always kind of takes that one mission and builds it into something more. She doesn't have technical training. It was something that in her retirement years and after her husband passed away, she wanted to get involved in. It was like a long lost dream of hers. And in the first book in this series, she manages to parlay this sort of mistaken identity situation into her getting a job with the CIA. So in this third book in this series, Mrs. Pollifax is hired to be a courier. She is asked to bring passports into Bulgaria because it is communist. There's a lot of like revolutionary underpinnings, and the CIA wants to pull some people out of there that they feel like are in jeopardy, but they don't know how to get the passports there. So nobody has ever seen Mrs. Pollifax there, so they send her. And of course, the mission that she gets involved in is just so much bigger than just that. So this was written in the early 1970s, I think 1971, and we're fully in that setting. So we've got the communist plot, we have Russia kind of on the side that's, somehow slightly involved. And then we've got these American hippies that end up flying into Bulgaria on the same plane that Mrs. Pollifax does, and they end up in this whole crazy situation. I did mark a passage that I wanted to share with you all. Mrs. Pollifax ends up with this kind of love interest in a way. It's a man that was her contact as a spy. And as he gets to know her, he just really seems to fall in love with her. And so they have this quiet conversation the night before this really big kind of climactic setting. She's sharing that she has grown a night blooming ceresis on her fire escape. And this is something that the story starts with. So we're kind of coming back to that here at the end. And he understands this is important and he asks her why. And she says, because lately I've had the feeling we rush towards something set into motion long ago. There are so many people in the world and so much destructiveness. I was astonished when I first heard that a night blooming cereus blooms only once a year and always at midnight. It implies intelligence somewhere. So it was just a beautiful, kind of quiet moment in this. I don't know, I think it shows a different side of Emily Pollifax, her more maternal side, her more, woman that is still attractive and can still kind of have feelings and emotions for someone else. And also, again, just her common thread of resilience and perseverance and creativity and being courageous. So this third installment was really great, and I'm excited to jump into the next. But before I do that, I am going to kind of switch gears and be reading some different kinds of books than mysteries. The Garden House by Marsha Willett is one that I brought to the botanical garden area to sit out, listening to the birds, sitting in the sunshine to finish this. It's not very long. It's a little bit over 200 pages. It's not super complex. And so it was one that I have been able to finish. So I wanted to share about that with you before starting on my next book. In the garden house is a little bit different than what I thought based on the flap on inside the book. We've got a dual point of view. So we have Elle, whose father, Martin, has just passed away. She has inherited his house, which is called the Pig Pen. Considering that the book is called The Garden House, I was like, well, that is really odd. We're hearing so much about the pig pen, and it just seems so much at odds with the title of the book and like the beautiful, cottage setting that you think of with garden house title. But Elle's father, Martin, has passed away. She is kind of going through his things. She's got his phone, and she discovers that he may have been in a relationship with someone, and so she's kind of trying to figure out what's going on there. And then she has a stepbrother. So after her parents got divorced when they were younger, her mother remarried. And in that remarriage, she and her brother got a stepbrother named Will. And so the other perspective that we have in this is Will. We also surprisingly get the perspective of the other characters that are in the village. So we're not just worried about Elle and Will. We also are finding out about Plum and Angus and Kate and Tom and Cassie. So there's a lot of different characters, and you do kind of switch into their points of view and kind of understanding what's going on. Through that, we discover a little bit of salacious is probably too big of a word, but like some sketchy things that have happened in the past, and we're kind of privy to that. And it is peripherally important, but to me, it's not the core of the mystery in this book. I really enjoyed having Will's perspective too, because number one, he's a pilot. And so Marsha Willett really put in a lot of like pilot life. You are, kind of transient, but you have your own apartment, but you're only there part of the time. And like, what life with his roommate was like. He also is a car buff, so he loves cars. And so we got his like perspective on his nice, sleek new car. It's just it was kind of an unusual Marsha Willett for me, an unusual kind of plot that we were going through. But I think still a good read. I'm glad that I read it, and it's one that I think could find its place in my recommendations. So again, pretty short book, so it was a pretty, fast read for me. And next, I am going to read The Lost Lake by Sarah Addison Allen. So I am going to gather up my things here and go find someplace to sit and start this book. So I have finished Lost Lake by Sarah Addison Allen. And actually, she has one coming out soon called Paper Ghosts, and I have the e-arc on NetGalley, so I need to read that. She really does not shy away, even though she does magical realism, and that can feel a little whimsical and cozy-ish. She really does not shy away from heavy topics. Sugar Queen is one that I think really handles heavy topics, really. And also even Garden Spells, which I love and really recommend, also handles some heavy topics. So she does do that well, where she can like balance the hard parts of life with the softer side. But in Lost Lake, there's this sense of moroseness. Our main character, at the very beginning, she says, I've woken up after a year of sleeping. She has lost the love of her life, who's also the father of her child. And she really is grieving. And I feel like that grief kind of permeates everything that she does. And she really is. It's such a beautiful way to describe it as someone who's waking up. I will say the magical realism part for me was a little bit less compelling than in all of her other works. I think I can understand why she did it the way she did it, but it definitely was, for me, the part that fell the most flat. But I did love everything else. I loved the healing arc. I loved all of the female relationships. It really was about sisterhood more than a lot of the love interest stuff that was happening. So that was Lost Lake. Really enjoyed it. I'm so glad that I read it and can just add this to my shelf of yet another Sarah Addison Allen that I read and enjoyed. And then I have the stack of books that I am reading this month with other people. So the first one I wanted to talk about is The Harvester. This is by Jean Stratton Porter. We read this for the Cozy Reader Book Club. I also, just really quickly, I also really liked how he talked about honey and the different medicinal properties based on harvesting it at different times of the year. I was like, that's so creative. I really love this book. I think the opinions in the book club were kind of mixed. I don't know if there's anybody else who said, oh, I loved it so much. I think a lot of people thought the romance was saccharine sweet. People also thought that there was too much nature writing. So the two things that I loved the most were the things that were the most contentious. So for me, I loved the nature writing. I loved being reminded of the medicinal properties of the plants in our world that have been, made available to us for healing purposes. And I think we've lost that. So I really appreciated that reminder in here. And I also really also enjoyed the romance. I thought it was really beautiful. So I still stand by, I love The Harvester. Other people said The Girl of the Limberlost is still their favorite. I also really like The Girl of the Limberlost. I do want to read Keeper of the Bees again because I remember really loving that one too. But I love The Harvester. I'm glad that I could read it in kind of a group setting and get feedback on it. I feel like that was really fascinating to me. Another book that I read with others was the Mayflowers read-along choice, and that is The Forgotten Garden by Kate Morton. I have done lives. They were so much fun. I really love doing lives. It's a lot of pressure because you've got to like talk alone basically for a long period of time, but I really enjoyed doing it, and I really enjoyed The Forgotten Garden. I was able to figure out kind of the mystery part of this, I think, as we were going along sooner than the very end, simply because of the way that Kate Morton allowed her characters to access the memories and experiences of the women who had gone before them in their ancestry. And I think if Kate Morton had not included that flashback sequence early on, I think I would have been in the dark for a lot longer. But because of that sequence, it just made me kind of think, I wonder. It is 3 points of view, and there is a lot of jumping around. So I know sometimes that can feel a little off-putting, but I think Kate Morton does it so well. We've talked on the lives about how she's able to really kind of make each timeline feel like its own separate voice. And I think Kate Morton has done such a fantastic job with her language choices, sentence structures, all of that for each timeline. If you haven't read it, do not be intimidated by its chunkiness. It goes really fast. It's a really great audio book as well. So that is The Forgotten Garden. And if you want more details and like spoilers and to see all that, I will link my live streams below. And for those for whom The Forgotten Garden was just a little bit too much of a commitment, we chose an alternate choice for the Mayflowers read along, and that was The Bookshop Ladies by Faith Hogan. I did do a separate video with a complete deep dive and wrap up for that, so I'll be sure to leave that link in the description box below. So if you are interested in adding your voice to that discussion, please, I would love to know your thoughts. I also had the honor of being invited to join Jen at Jen's Reading Life for her Coming Home by Rosamund Pilcher read along. I've had so much fun reading this and then also joining Jen on her live stream. So this is also a chunker. Jen was very kind to us and had it cross over 2 months. I definitely prefer the second half to the first half. I just feel like, I don't know if it's because I've gotten to know the character or if it's because Judy has matured in a way that I just find her a little bit more relatable. I really have enjoyed this experience. And then another book that I am reading in a group situation is the new Magdalen by Wilkie Collins. This story is fascinating to me. Wilkie Collins has written it as a play, just as a couple of his other works that I've read and enjoyed. So he sets the stage. You really can, when you close your eyes, kind of see the stage and kind of where each character is through this. I love that setup. I know it's not for everyone, but in this we have a plot of not mistaken identity, but stolen identity. I still have a few days to go on this, so I will get back to you on my full thoughts on it. Over the last few rainy days that we have had this month, I have taken some time to finish the new Magdalen by Wilkie Collins. As I mentioned, I have read this with a group of ladies and we're doing messages to each other on Voxer, which is always just so much fun. I think it just really enriches the experience. The way that this book begins is just so dynamic. We are in the cottage on the frontier in France that is under attack by German soldiers in the year 1870, the year of the war between France and Germany. So in this house, we have two women. Mercy Merrick, she is basically a fallen woman. She has no potential for improving her lot in life and is now, relegated to the dredges of society. She is sharing this house with other soldiers. She's a nurse and is kind of traveling with a doctor. And there's a traveling woman who also ends up being at this house, who is Grace Roseberry. Grace comes from Canada. She has a letter of introduction to a lady, Janet, who is very well connected, and Grace is going to go and be her companion. I really love the premise of this. I loved, again, the dynamic beginning. You're like, what is going on? This is just crazy. And yet I do think Wilkie Collins gets bogged down in the middle of this. We just seem to really circle and circle around this stolen identity and the fears of being caught and, all of the plot devices that Wilkie Collins has set up to make this feel very tense does. But then we just circle it. And so the pacing really kind of lags in the middle where you're like, okay, let's kind of move on. And the thing that's the most frustrating is we have an epilogue that Wilkie Collins has written up in kind of like this epistolary style. So much happens in the epilogue, so much that I feel like if Wilkie Collins had kind of wrapped up that tension sooner, he could have really expounded on the epilogue being part of the novel instead of just like this, here's kind of everything that happened after this situation. So I think that's kind of where it's lacking for me. I will say, I love Wilkie Collins, at least of everything that I've read of his, and this is no exception. I think that this is a actually a really great book for a book club situation because there is so much to discuss in here. And I think if you can kind of get through the pacing lags that are in the middle of it, I do think that it is very imaginative and engaging and really thought-provoking. And I do think that this is a book that will stick with you after the fact, that you'll kind of look back and think on it. I've loved reading this Wilkie Collins this month, and I'm excited to find another one of his to read soon. So I think that's where I'm going to wrap up this wrap-up video. I would love to know what you read in the month of May. I also would like to know, have you read any of the books that I shared about this month? I'd love to know what you thought of The Forgotten Garden by Kate Morton if you joined us in that read-along. Such a fun experience. I hope if you were not able to make the lives that you can find them in the description box down below and you can click on them and watch and kind of see. I tried to put in the comments that people had made so that you can kind of keep track with the flow of the conversation. I also would love to know what your favorite book choices were for the Mayflowers readathon. It was just so very fun, and I love finding books with flowers on the cover and kind of incorporating them this month. Let me know what your favorites were for the month. As always, you guys, thanks so much for watching, and until next time.